Miss Dominique Hazzard, activist, organizer, member of the Black Youth Project 100. Question: I sympathize with your struggle for racial justice, but I disagree with your divisive, alienating, disrespectful, disruptive tactics.
Well, it's not up to you to decide the tactics. This is a Black-led movement. We know what's best for us, and the role of allies really is to be supporting and amplifying Black organizing and Black voices. And it's really problematic when you spend time tone policing the way we do things instead of supporting us.
Oh, that makes me feel uncomfortable.
Right. A lot of times that's the best way for white people to feel is uncomfortable, because that is usually when white people give us what we want. Usually when we try gentler tactics, writing letters and making meetings and doing all these things.
Good stuff.
It doesn't get us what we want. White people tend to not listen until we fuck up their shit or burn things down or interrupt them. So if if that's what it takes, that's what we're gonna do.
Well, that makes me feel uncomfortable.
White supremacy makes me feel uncomfortable. So
Okay, that definitely makes me feel uncomfortable.
So, Black people dying in the streets makes me feel uncomfortable. So I don't really have the time and capacity to help you feel more comfortable with the steps I'm taking to address those issues and create freedom for all Black people.
Well, that's different. That's different because, just the fact that I feel uncomfortable about being called a racist has nothing to do with your discomfort of Black people dying every 28 hours. It's not even comparable. My discomfort is just out of disrespect. Yours is
Grief.
But
Pain. Here's the thing. When white people especially white people who claim to be allies to Black people who are leading the struggle for Black movements, when y'all put yourselves in the center, that's white supremacy. Yes.
What?
Yes, that is white supremacy. When you think that you know what is best for Black people, if you think your ideas are the ideas that should be shaping and leading the movement for Black lives, that's white supremacy. And it's really, it's something that especially progressive, liberal, radical white people have to push themselves to challenge within themselves, that urge to always think that your voice should be first, or that you really know what's best and you know everything. So this movement is a Black-led movement, and the role of allies is to be supporting Black leadership, be supporting Black voices and amplifying them. And so if you spent the whole day on the anniversary of the death of Mike Brown critiquing two Black women who are trying to stop their people from dying, literally, you spend the whole day on that anniversary doing that and calling them unstrategic or foolish or angry, you need to think about that a little more. It's not about white people's feelings. I know, it's really not. And honestly, if we went about this movement in a way where we prioritize and centered white people and their feelings and making sure that y'all are comfortable, we wouldn't accomplish anything. I encourage everybody to read Letter from a Birmingham Jail, because in this letter, Martin Luther King Jr. is responding to folks who sound really similar to white people today, who are saying, we stand with you and we are your allies, but that thing you did the other day was mean and loud and angry, and we think you should wait for another time and do it another way.
Agreed. So I've heard people in the Black Lives Matter movement say that sometimes even white progressive liberal allies can be useless, if not harmful, to the movement. What?
Yeah, sometimes white liberals are the worst. A lot of times white progressive people can be the hardest people to call out on racism and white supremacy, because they think that they have everything together. They're like, oh, I'm so progressive, and I have 10 Black friends. And so it can be really, really difficult to help them see the unconscious bias and unconscious white supremacy that they have. And a lot of times, white liberals are actually the voices who are doing the most tone policing. So instead of just saying, oh, I don't think that, I think we should kill more Black people, or I think we should do whatever racist thing, they're the folks who are saying, well, why don't you say it more nicely? Why don't you wait your turn until later? So yeah, that can be really harmful. And we just see white people, particularly white liberals, again and again, centering their own feelings, their own agendas, in so many different movements. It's been happening since like the 60s. Martin Luther King wrote about it in Letter to the Birmingham Jail.
Well, if you're not aligned with us, you're aligned with the conservatives who are racist overtly. So, I mean, what do you expect? What do you want from us?
We want no racism. We don't want overt racism. We also don't want to deal with implicit racism or subtle, insidious racism that is really prevalent in places like Seattle and places like Boston, these bastions of white liberalism.
Would you agree that all lives matter?
Black lives matter.
It's a yes or no question. Would you agree that all lives matter?
No.
Okay, well, we're done here, aren't we?
If all lives mattered, then we would not see the disproportionate incarceration, sentencing, murders of Black people by the state. So what that means right now is that some lives matter more than others. So, all lives don't matter. That's why there's the Black Lives Matter movement, to call attention into the ways that Black life is not valued by this country. And so this movement is all about lifting up Black people, Black bodies, Black lives. That's why it's very intentional, the Black Lives Matter piece.
Well, that's a perspective that I didn't think about, and I did not come up with it, and I have to deal with that. Here's the thing, though. The way that I wanted those questions to be answered was as such. Would you agree that all lives matter? Yes. Would you say that Black lives are a subsection of all lives in the world? Yes. Aha! Therefore, what's the need for Black Lives Matter? Why not all lives matter? You're being divisive response.
I think that it almost pains white people in this country to say Black lives matter. Why is that? I think we should think about that. Just the other day, somebody cut the word Black out of a sign in front of the church. That's white supremacy. That's never, ever wanting Black people to be allowed to be celebrated or be the focus of anything. It's wanting white people to always be in the mix. That's white supremacy. And I think an important thing to understand about this movement is that it's unlike so many movements we've seen before, in that it's intentionally trying to be decentralized, centering Black women, Black queer and trans people, Black working class people. And so this is not a hierarchical movement centered around like charismatic Black men, leaders who decide who gets to talk and when. And BLM specifically is like that. It's a very decentralized organization where Black people who want to work on these issues and be part of this modern movement for Black liberation can do so and like take things into their own hands and do what they feel is necessary to create freedom for themselves. And also, I think one thing people don't understand about the movement is there's so many different organizations and individuals working on it. So there's Black Lives Matter, which is across the country. There's Black Youth Project 100, which is an organizing group of Black 18 to 35-year-olds across the country working for Black freedom. There's Operation Help or Hush. There's Dream Defenders. There's all of these different organizations, and together we are the movement for Black lives.
If there's no hierarchical leaders, it's doomed to fail.
I don't think so. I think that's what makes us strong.
It's going to be a repeat of Occupy Wall Street.
No. You know why? Because what we're doing here is centering the most marginalized voices. That's why this movement is structured the way it is. We really.
If you're centering the most marginalized voices, what happens to the majority voices? They're no longer centered. How do you think that makes us feel?
It doesn't matter. No one cares.
It doesn't matter. I care. I mean, I care. I care.
So if you no longer support the movement as a person with more privilege, that means you were never really an ally to begin with. And so that looks like white folks who are, I'm an ally, I'm so progressive. And then once things get out of your control or they get out of the scope of what you think they should be, you're suddenly, distancing yourselves. You were never an ally to begin with.
But I want to be an ally.
That means supporting Black leadership and amplifying Black voices, and at the same time recognizing that Black people are not a monolith, and there's all types of different voices out here. And so when you're doing anything other than that, it's derailment.
Derailment? Well, what about derailing Bernie Sanders, the most natural ally of the Black Lives Matter movement? Why not target somebody else, like Hillary or the Republicans, Trump or Huckabee?
Well, Donald Trump has said that he will fight us. So we are going after those folks in different ways with different strategies. But using this specific tactic with Mike Huckabee actually wouldn't be strategic. Hopping up on the stage to talk to Mike Huckabee and demanding, that he embrace Black Lives Matter would not work. He would not listen to us. No matter how many people got up on that stage, he would not change. He would not release a racial justice platform. Right? So that actually would be pretty unstrategic, because what probably would happen is he would refuse, and then all the racists out there would be like, yeah, Mike Huckabee, and he would get even more support and racist votes because he would double down on white supremacy. So that would not be strategic. So that basically what that would be like is if I was part of a progressive organization as a queer woman of color, which I am, and I tried a whole bunch of different tactics to get them to do better, and I eventually decided to confront them on stage at their national conference, and people told me that that was not strategic, because what I should be spending my time doing instead is confronting the real homophobes, the Westboro Baptist Church. That's a ridiculous train of logic.
Oh, man.
It actually made a lot of sense to target Bernie Sanders and was quite strategic. Bernie Sanders is somebody who already identifies as progressive and is actually pretty close to being right on these issues of Black Lives Matter, but we just need to move him a little bit closer, and we need him to add a racial justice platform to his economic justice platform, which he did after these two wonderful Black women interrupted his rally.
Well, the two agitators who disrupted Bernie, Marissa Janae Johnson and Mara Jacqueline Williford, they aren't even official members of the Black Lives Matter movement.
They are. They're founders of Black Lives Matter Seattle.
No! No!
So the actual message of Marissa was completely derailed by really rabid Bernie Sanders supporters. So the issues were, one, Black Lives, people who are part of this movement are pushing candidates across the country and across the spectrum to be talking about the criminalization of Black people in this country, the racism in the police state, and other types of structural racism that Black people and other people of color are facing. That's why she was up there. And specifically for Bernie Sanders, it was talking about the need for him to incorporate a racial justice lens into his work. I think Bernie Sanders is great, right? I think he has an amazing economic justice lens, and I think that economic justice lens is going to be great for Black people, but the reality is that that's not enough. That's not it. I know, it's not enough.
He marched with MLK. That's enough. He could have stopped the next day.
And if I could give him a cookie, I wouldn't. But economic justice.
You know what? You are not going to win allies to the movement if you are withholding cookies. I mean, cookies make people want to like you and fight for racial justice.
We cannot. I refuse, really, to give white people cookies for doing basic, decent things. Like marching with MLK in the 60s, that is like the most basic bar that a white person should have been doing.
Okay, nobody
at that
is
time.
listening to you anymore or hearing your words because you just said you refuse to give white people cookies. If that is not the definition of reverse racism, of black supremacy, I don't know what is.
Marissa Janae Johnson, in her press release, was talking about why she was up there. And she was up there because Bernie Sanders needed to release a racial justice platform. She was up there because he needed to incorporate a racial justice lens into his work and into his campaign strategy. And she was up there because he needed to not just talk about his support for black people, but actually incorporate black people into his campaign. And Bernie Sanders had not been doing that. After he was disrupted the first time at Netroots Nation, he made a meeting with activists and organizers who are part of the Black Lives Matter movement, and then he canceled it. When he was questioned and asked about the death of Freddie Gray, he talked about unemployment. Unemployment was not the reason that Freddie Gray was whipped around in that truck.
It didn't help.
When he was asked about the death of Sandra Bland, he again talked about unemployment. Sandra Bland was driving to her new job when she was pulled over by the police. And so it's really important to incorporate this racial justice lens because economics alone is not going to get us freedom for all black people. You got to address white supremacy.
This is bad strategy.
It's excellent strategy. And again, it's really important that folks who are outside of the movement aren't trying to lead and tell us what our strategy should be. We know what our strategy should be. And these two very brave young women have an excellent strategy. Targeting Bernie Sanders makes a whole lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, one, because I believe that he is the person who has the policies that will be best for black people in that country.
Right? So high five him.
So I'll high five him for some things, but on other issues, he needs to be better. So the primaries is a time to shape the candidates that you want to support into the best candidates. And black people, and especially black people who are part of this movement, we can't fully support Bernie Sanders, no matter how great some of his policies will be, if he was not willing to release policies around the prison state, around criminalization of black people, around voting rights. So we need all of those things from Bernie Sanders. And so if he's the closest person to us, it makes a lot of sense to start with him and get him all the way on our side. That is a victory. It also makes a lot of sense because what if Bernie Sanders doesn't win? One, he's going to go back to the Senate. So now we have another senator who really understands the importance and has a racial justice framework. And he's somebody who's probably going to listen. He's the person who's closest to us right now, so he's the person who's most likely actually to change and to become a real ally to today's Black Lives Matter movement. And so if we can shape him, even if he ends up still just being a senator, that is important. That is a victory. He's also a presidential candidate who is going to be debating Hillary Clinton. And we know that it's almost like he's a secondary target and that he is shaping what Hillary Clinton's platform is going to be. So it's a way to get to her, who is somebody who has a lot more security at her rallies. It's a little harder to get up on the stage. You know, another thing to think about, it really makes it clear that this whole thing is a derailment, is that organizers and activists who are part of this movement are targeting politicians across the country. So Black Lives Matter Boston had an action targeting Hillary Clinton and asking her, I know, targeting,
Wait.
Can you believe it?
Wait,
Targeting
I
Hillary
thought
Clinton.
that this was a George Soros-funded AstroTurf campaign in order to, paid stooges getting in there, like Marissa and Mara, in order to undermine Bernie as a way to promote and prop up Hillary.
I know, it is hard to believe that black women of their own accord could want to do this type of organizing and pushing of candidates, but that is exactly what happened.
Well, at the same time as being a Soros Hillary Clinton stooge, she's also a right-wing Sarah Palin stooge. I mean, they're just such opportunists, Mara and Marissa.
Yeah, that's not true.
Well, not with that attitude. These strategies are not effective.
So far, disrupting Bernie Sanders has been a pretty great strategy. At Netroots, he was disrupted by activists who wanted to talk about Say Her Name and the deaths of black women. The next day, he gave very extensive comments about Sandra Bland and how race contributed to her death. In Seattle, he was disrupted by people asking him to incorporate a racial justice lens into his work. The next day, he released a racial justice platform.
I mean, how can you not see that as a coincidence?
I see that as Black-led movement work being effective.
Well, that's only 2 examples. I mean, things work in rules of 3. Is there a third thing?
Yeah, after the Seattle protests, he also hired a black woman to be his new press secretary, Simone Sanders.
No relation.
This movement has been pressuring him, and it finally worked, and it made a lot of sense because now we have somebody who has excellent economic justice platform as well as excellent racial justice platform. It's a win.
It's a win? Did you see the way the audience reacted? The liberals, the progressives, the open-minded, the compassion, the unifying, the humanistic. They're mad at you people.
It was pretty scary, pretty racist.
Reverse racist? Huh?
They booed a call for a moment of silence from Mike Brown.
It was Bernie's turn to speak. And Mike Brown died a year ago, and as a woman said from the audience, we already honored him. We already did it.
Oh. So ridiculous. I think it's important to recognize that this was one tactic, and again, Black Lives Matter organizers across the country are smart, and so we're using different tactics to target different people, and so it's working. So, hopping up on the stage, that made sense for Bernie. The hashtag Hold Up Hillary activists in Boston, they had a meeting with her backstage after her event because that makes more sense for targeting Hillary Clinton. So they were asking her to take responsibility for the role that she played as Secretary of State, First Lady, and as a senator in perpetuating the war on drugs, which has oppressed black people for several decades now. And then there's lots of other tactics that people actually are using to target GOP candidates. If there weren't, do you think that there would have been a Black Lives Matter question at the first GOP debate? No. How did that question happen? It was because of the work of Black Lives Matter organizers working in strategic ways.
Well, I mean, I guess if you explain it that way, and then it makes sense because of all of the reasons.
Yeah.
But I didn't get to come up with that.
Right.
And explain that to you. How do you think that makes me feel? I am the explainer.
No.
Can I have a cookie?
No.
Fine.
You're probably sad because you can't have a cookie, but no one cares.
Well,
We're dying. Like, we don't have time to
oh, we're dying for cookies because we have low blood sugar.
No, look, we don't care. We don't have time to wipe our tears and explain everything to you before we do it. We don't have time.
Just because white people are not dying on average every 28 hours being murdered in America doesn't mean I don't deserve cookies from you.
That's what it means.
How much more do you people want?
We want freedom for all black people and an end to white supremacy.
Oh.
It's a lot to ask. I know it's a lot to ask.
Oh, stop saying white supremacy. I picture burning crosses on lawns and KKK hoods. Can't you say something like that makes me feel better? Like lack of institutionalized racism of white people having stuff and it's not right because everybody should have stuff?
No. White supremacy. That's what it is.
It's really going to turn a lot of people off.
They were never with us to begin with.
Okay, so the Black Lives Matter movement, non-hierarchical, decentralized, means different things to different people, no leaders. What does the Black Lives Matter movement mean to you, Dominique Hazzard?
The Black Lives Matter movement. To me, it is a freedom struggle. It is the fight to end white supremacy and anti-blackness. It is the liberation movement of our time. And it's really, I think, going to be an example for all other movements that come after it about how to be intersectional. It's not just about this really revolutionary work we're doing. It's about the way that we're doing it. We're doing it in a way that really lifts up and centers all Black people, but the most marginalized Black people.
It's so Black-centric.
Yeah. It's revolutionary, right?
Any other thoughts? Oh! I mean, this is Dominique.
Black Lives Matter. We ready, we coming. It is our duty to fight. It is our duty to win. And we're gonna do whatever it takes to win Black freedom.
Is there anything you'd like to plug or tell people how to get involved?
Sure. An excellent way to get involved is to support Black-led organizing. Two really great groups to do that are doing that are Black Youth Project 100. You can go to byp100.org. Again, this is a group of 18 to 35-year-old Black organizers who are working on different campaigns across the country, from trying to get the police officer who killed Rekia Boyd, Dante Servin, fired, to Fight for 15, to working in pre-K suspensions here in DC. You can go to byp100.org and find out how to get involved there.
I guess. As uncomfortable as you make me feel, and I want you to think about that, thank you very much for your time and speaking with me, Miss Dominique Hazzard.
Thanks.
Dude.
Woo!
Feel good about it?
Yes.
Shit. Yeah, right on.